What is a demon?
The Bible talks about an innumerable company of angels. We don't know how many angels there are. What we do know is a third of them fell and followed Lucifer. When certain of these fallen angels came to earth, there were certain of them that had sexual relations with women, resulted in the birthing of these Nephilim, and they are half spirit because they came from angel, half human. I mean, because the Old Testament version,
flesh.
New Testament, yeah, this is half flesh. And so I think all of these represent demons.
Welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about demons, and that sounds a little weird and a little scary. But we're going to be conscientious about how we go about it, how we have this discussion. But since our podcast is a lot about the science and the Bible, because we're talking about demons today, there's not a lot of science behind that, but there's a lot of world influence, a lot of things in the world that we think represent this demonic presence or this different spiritual things that happen in the world. So we're going to talk about those things as well. But first off, let's just define, what is a demon?
Right. Such a great question. And we have talked about this in our previous podcast, but let's just kind of go back and just relay that foundation because it is such an important question. We have Lucifer as this probably archangel, fallen. Now we know him as the devil. We have the fallen angels that followed Lucifer, and we get that. I believe it's in the book of Revelation. There's 1/3 of the angels. So the Bible talks about an innumerable company of angels. It's just this massive number. We can't. We don't know how many angels there are. What we do know is a third of them fell and followed Lucifer. So we have fallen angels that I think you believe are demonic forces that we wrestle with, and then the third, again, spiritual forces. We talked before in the Nephilim podcast about when certain of these fallen angels came to earth, there were certain of them that had sexual relations with women, and that resulted in the birthing of these Nephilim, and they are half spirit because they came from angel, half human, or not actually necessarily human. I mean, because the Old Testament version,
flesh.
New Testament, yeah, this is half flesh. And so you have this weird that being that was never supposed to be. And so we have these Nephilim, and when they died, now they have a spirit that they should never have had, and so they have no place to go. And so their spirits are out there as well. And so I think all of these represent demons. So we have Lucifer, we have the fallen angels, and we have the disembodied spirits of the fallen Nephilim.
The Nephilim. And I just wanted to remind people that the book of Enoch has kind of, does a really great job explaining what may have occurred. We already determined that the book of Enoch is not canonized.
Right.
It's not part of the Bible. It is quoted in Jude. Now, we did a video on this.
Right.
I am forgetting the name of that video. Do you remember that? It was
the Book of Enoch.
It was about the Book of Enoch. Yeah. And if you haven't watched it, to get the most out of this video that we're doing, I would highly encourage you to watch it because it really explains this process. And I remember a quote from the Book of Enoch that said to these, it was like the rebuke of God as saying to these fallen angels, now humankind are now worshiping demons, putting sacrifices to demons as if they're gods. But it's
couldn't be any clearer that they're demons.
But they're demons. But it also couldn't be any clearer that humankind didn't know.
Right, and it is being influenced by them.
They're being influenced, but they're in complete deception. And Enoch talks about it in the book of Enoch.
Right.
So quite clearly.
Right. So these are definitely these spiritual forces. We're just going to call them all demons. I'm sure there's different classifications because when you talk about angels, they're not just angels, all kind of different versions of angels in the Bible. So I'm sure there's all kind of different versions of these fallen angels, but in general, we have Lucifer, we have the fallen angels, and we have the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim.
Okay, so is there a structure, an order, a hierarchy that they walk in? You just named a couple different levels here.
Yeah.
Or it sounds like levels.
Yeah,
What you're
there's- so there-
saying are different.
There's
So
a
what does-
fascinating scripture. I'm going to read it. It's in Ephesians 6. It's Ephesians 6:12. And it's written by Paul. And Paul says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age." And so he lays out three things. We're not wrestling against people, flesh and blood.
Right.
We're wrestling against principalities, powers, and rulers of the darkness of this age. Now, what's really interesting, you kind of just read that and you think it's all the same. But when you get to the Greek behind that, we have the word principalities is arche. It has it denotes two different kind of meanings. One is old or ancient. It's actually where we get the term archaic from. So we have this arche is ancient, some ancient being. And then the other use of arche is for a principal ruler, somebody high in authority. And so we have these ancient beings of high authority. So principalities is the top dogs. It may not be Lucifer specifically, but it's the top dogs underneath Lucifer, who is now, of course, Satan, right? And so I picture with that scripture about the Prince of Persia, I picture that being a principality, that demon force. He's in charge of ancient Persia, modern day Iran. I'm sure there's other ones all around the planet. I call that a principality. The next word is against powers. Powers is a super fascinating word. It's actually in the Greek, it's exousia, and it means delegated authority. Paul uses that in regards to us believers. When Jesus, his sacrifice on the cross, and he rose again, and when we receive him as our Lord and our Savior, his delegated authority comes to us. So now his victories over sin and death, his victories over the dark forces, we are able to use that same authority in our, not of course by ourselves, but because of his name.
Right.
That word is exousia. It's also the same term we use here. And so there's a dark version of exousia. And so there's clearly, I believe it's these fallen angels. They've been given authority from Satan and from these principalities to do what they do. So it's almost like a second level. Can I tell you specifically it's angels? No, I have no idea. But the way I'm reading it, the principalities I would think are almost fallen archangels. Powers I think would be the fallen angels. And the third one is such a fascinating word in the Greek, the rulers of the darkness of this age. The word, I'm going to see if I can get this right, is cosmos krateros. It's actually a compound word, cosmos, which we actually talked about way back. And we talked about the age of the earth and we talked about Lucifer's flood. Cosmos is the world order of things. Okay. So it's cosmos, and the other word is kratos. The kratos is raw power. So it's talking about raw power brought into some semblance of order. The word cosmokrateros is used back in the day for military training camps, where they'd bring raw recruits, men who didn't know how to fight, men who didn't have organization. They were brought to these military camps where they learned those things and became a fighting force. That's being used here for this term, rulers of the darkness of this age. I find it fascinating because picture, who are these beings with raw power that are being formed into an army?
Right.
I'm guessing it's the Nephilim, the Nephilim spirits, right? The disembodied spirits of the Nephilim.
Right.
Can you
Demons,
right? So picture that, like this raw power of these fallen Nephilim beings that were never supposed to be.
But they're all chaotic
And doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And now these demons above them, these fallen angels above them, are trying to bring them into a semblance of a fighting force. And you know who they're going against. It's not themselves. They're going against us.
They're going against humankind.
Exactly. So I just think that's such a fascinating word, cosmokrateros. So again, we have the principalities, the top dog. I'm assuming they're fallen archangels. Again, I don't know. Against powers. Clearly some second tier of I'm assuming angels that are now classified as demons, and they've been given delegated authority from those above them. And then the rulers of darkness is basically a warring army being developed.
Wow. Okay. Well, what do you think they're trying to accomplish? Like, what's their plan? Why and why?
First off, there's different answers to that over the different ages. Before Jesus came, they were clearly trying to prevent Jesus from coming. Right. And so you had, kings destroying or killing all the children under the age of 2 because there was they thought that Jesus was being born. And so there's different answers to different ages. But right now, today, in very high level, the Bible says to steal, to kill, and to destroy. That's simplistically put. I have a whole list of things the Bible says that these demons do. Jump in, but I'm just going to let me fly through these real quickly, and then you jump in.
Right.
So they possess people uncause, dumbness, deafness, blindness, grievous vexation, lunacy and mania, uncleanliness, supernatural strength, suicide, fits, lusts, counterfeit worship, error, sickness, disease, torments, deceptions, enchantments, witchcraft. I'm going to stop. I'm about a third of the way through. You get the point.
You know what? It's interesting because when you were talking about this chaotic order, that it seemed like the demonic, like the low levels, so to speak, were acting, but then they're creating an army. They're creating like order, and that's in like the dark spiritual realm. And it's interesting because when you talk about like those examples of what they're doing to us, to humankind, it sounds to me immediately, I'm like, oh, they're trying to cause disorder, chaos. They're trying to get us in the way
amongst
that
humankind,
they were amongst the humankind. Like if they can scatter us, if they can divide us, they can get people fighting. And, right now we're in the political season, and it's so crazy and it's so decisive and it's like neighbor hating neighbor. It's like, you're having like divisions over, just political differences.
Yeah, we're going to fight over whose sign is in our yard.
Yeah, it's really sickening and disgusting when we used to come together on things that that we could all enjoy together, like, football or something,
yeah, exactly.
or just having fun, barbecues. It's like there's this chaos. And so that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, wow, so they may have been, we don't know, we're just speculating and so they may have come from this chaotic order that they're trying to form into an army. And at the same time, part of their order, it sounds like making humankind chaotic so that we don't come together and fight that
them.
enemy.
That's such a good point.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to me.
Yeah. And what's very not full of fear on these things at all, but we really do need to have our eyes open because I did just go through a third of the things biblically that these demonic forces are coming after us for. It is absolutely crazy what they can do, what control they can do if we allow them to do it. Ultimately, they're taking us away from God.
Right.
They can either get us to not follow him, or they can make us believe that he doesn't even exist. Like there's all kind of things that they're doing. They're bringing chaos to our world, like you said. But ultimately, they're coming to steal. They're coming to kill. They're coming to destroy.
Right. And specifically, stealing from us, from humankind, that to steal, kill, and destroy.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, I know you're going to step into this, right? But as we always do we see that in the world? Do we have any evidence of this? Or making these big claims, again, that there's a spiritual realm. Do we have any evidence? Did you have any questions before we dive into that topic?
No, I don't. That was going to be my next question. Like, do we see this happening? Is there any suggestive things in the world to suggest that they're present and they're having this manipulation or trying to manipulate us and manipulate maybe our world system and the order that we operate in?
Absolutely. We have some, and we're going to go through that shortly. We're going to try to break this up because our next podcast is going to be on answering that exact question on the individual person, individual man or woman. We're going to talk about that because it's such an important topic. Today we're going to talk about the world systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we'd said, maybe we shouldn't talk about this, but I actually feel like I want to. There was, and I only do this because I want to talk about, there's not just one area in which they're affecting. There are multiple areas in which these demons are affecting things, and I think we should look at some of those. There was a prophecy. I'm not going to get into this whole thing with somebody it was probably back in the 70s or 80s or maybe 60s. I don't know. It doesn't matter for the scope of this conversation. And I'm not even going to give the name because I don't want people to get all weirded out and freaking out. But it was about how this prophecy about how communism was going to take over the United States. And it was going to take it over financially.
It was atheistic
communism. Thank you. It was going to take over our nation financially, politically, and socially or culturally. And so you can start to see right off the bat there, yeah, you know what? Those are three areas in which we might see demonic interaction. And me just saying that out loud, like I'm to myself, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Like you can't deny that prophecy is being fulfilled. But I know a lot of people don't necessarily believe in prophecy, and we're just going to move off from that. But it's segmented demonic influence into three areas. So I'd like to do that with us today.
Okay.
I want to talk about some evidence for those who may not believe in this stuff, some evidence that demonic influence is occurring in world systems. I want to talk about it in the science community. I want to talk about it in the political community. And I want to talk about it culturally or socially.
Okay.
So let's start with the science side, because this one, I still don't have an answer what's going on here. You've heard of CERN. It's the European Organization for Nuclear Research. It's the actual acronym is in French. I'm not going to get into that, but CERN's headquarters like in Switzerland, France, and it's like the leading area for nuclear research. They manage the Large Hadron Collider, which is this massive particle collider underneath Switzerland, France, right? They're the organization in charge of that. It's purely scientific. We're going after string theory and spooky interaction, all these weird particles and all these weird things. It's pure science. Out front of their headquarters in Geneva, there's a 6-foot tall statue. That statue is of Shiva, the destroyer, the Hindu god Shiva, the destroyer. Why?
Right.
Why would a science institute have a giant statue of a Hindu god who's supposed to be the world destroyer?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And they make claims like, well, Shiva's the god of death and rebirth. And I'm like, so is Jesus. Do you picture them putting a 6-foot tall cross out front of CERN? Can you imagine any scenario where that would ever happen? Right?
Right.
But instead, they do have a 6-foot tall version of Shiva, the destroyer. And it just gets me thinking, what's going on here? Why? What are they trying to do there? What is CERN trying to do? Why do they have the world destroyer out front? So I actually did some research on this. And I actually have a couple of quotes here for some people. This first one's a reporter. So, okay, take it with a grain of salt here, right? The guy's name is Adam Barker. He was writing for Tech Bubble. And he wrote this as a quote: CERN is expecting to find other dimensions and open portals to these dimensions. If you have the image of Stargate in your head right now, you are spot on. Okay, so I know largely CERN is going after particle research, subatomic particles, trying to find all these weird different things and quantum mechanics and all that. I'm not trying to challenge that. This guy obviously talked to somebody who says that they're trying to open up portals into another dimension. All right, but he's just a reporter, right? What does he know? It's just all fake and lie. Well, Sergio Bertolucci, he's the director of research and scientific computing for CERN, said, and this is a quote out of the Register, "Out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it." So we have this massive research on, council, if you will, I guess trying to open up pathways into other dimensions. And now they have a Hindu god out front, the world destroyer. You can't tell me there's not a demonic influence going on in that.
Yeah. And the reason, because it just seems so unreasonable or unfathomable. Like what? Like in the human mind, you think, or this scientist mind, like if you really feel like you can open a portal in a dimension and you don't know what's going to come through, like it's kind of like, why would you do that? Like,
Yeah, what are you doing?
like what? Like we kind of, like I don't see a reason why we would need that when it's an uncertain thing that I don't know could
Destroy
wreak
our
havoc
world,
and
hence
destroy-
Shiva, right? Yeah.
Right.
So again, understand
Right.
that I know a lot of people can say this is pure conspiracy and blah blah blah. And there's
Yeah.
very specific reason why they have Shiva out there, and I get it. Like you can view this from whatever lens you want to view it.
Right.
You can deny these quotes ever existed. I took them out of a book called A Bad and Ascending, I think it's called, or Bad and Rising. So these are straight quotes from there. I don't know, but I just have a hard time saying there's not some kind of influence going on here. Like even if this is just a very small subset of the people that actually work at CERN, yeah, something's going on. This shouldn't even be a conversation. How did two people have quotes about something about
Right.
doorways if there's not something actually going on?
Or a desire to have,
desire,
something there. And
So we can talk about science
Right.
all we want, and you depend on where you land on COVID vaccines and all this other stuff and fentanyl and blah, 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 blah. Not going to get any of that, but you can start to see, yeah, maybe there is some influence demonically in the science realm. And I think we've just shown that because I just can't come to any other conclusion. Let's talk about politics. I think anybody would say, yep, it's all over politics. Let's move on, right?
both sides.
Yeah,
Yeah,
both
it's
sides.
just
Yeah.
crazy.
So, but I do there was a tunnel, the world's deepest and longest tunnel, runs under Switzerland and Germany and France. It's called the Gotthard Base Tunnel. I'm sure I butchered it, but I think that's how it's a Gotthard Base Tunnel. So this thing opened up, I think it was 2016, and all the politicians from those regions attended. We're going to show a little video here, a very short snippet of this. It was multiple hours long, I believe. I think this video is like 6 minutes long. We just want you and I to watch it and our viewers to watch it, and we'll have some comments on this. All these politicians are watching this thing and cheering, wonder how wonderful this opening ceremony was for this tunnel. So we have all these hundreds of politicians there, and I can't see any other way than to look at this thing and say there was something seriously demonic going on, and all the politicians are cheering for it. So let's go ahead and watch this. I'm going to reach over and get it started. So what we see here is Angela Merkel. She's right there. She was the leader of Germany. They're all the big dogs were in attendance.
Except for, I don't think there was any U.S.
No, I don't think the
president,
U.S. is
right?
part of this. It's definitely a more European tunnel.
Kind of understand why once it gets going. So the first thing we have here is a large group of people walking into the center of the tunnel almost like they're dazed or under the control of the music.
This thing reminds me of communism right here. The Workers United marching.
Yeah.
Touch on this video.
Yeah. It definitely.
Now, the first part of this isn't so bad. Just a choreographed dance put on by people dressed up as construction workers.
It's pretty weird
Sure, the
already.
music's a bit dark, but overall nothing too weird yet. At about 5 minutes in, the construction workers become a bit manic, like they don't know what they're doing. And then right after that, this last train car brings in a group of people who are dressed in more revealing clothing. And
It's interesting. It's almost like what we were just talking about, that chaotic realm, and then this fallen angel coming down.
Yeah, look at this. How can that be anything but an angel representation of an angel, right?
Yeah. And there's some censorship going on. This person was naked, right?
Yeah, it had no top, and there was a lot of sexual content. Let's just leave it
Yeah.
at
After
that.
this,
Male on
another
male,
card is
women on
rolled in
woman.
with what people refer to
Yeah.
as demonic creatures, and then with them is a goat man who typically represents Satan.
Now we
in
have
ancient
Satan coming
circles.
out and a bunch of demons. What else could that be?
It's faint,
That-
but you can hear this chanting.
Yeah,
this weird.
creepy
As I was
laughing.
watching
Yeah.
through this with my friend, the thoughts in my head were, all of this for a tunnel? But don't worry, it gets a lot stranger than this.
Yeah, he's laughing.
At around 14 minutes, we see this goat is being worshipped, and people are bringing him offerings of trees. which...
Yeah, I know. He's going to talk about upside-down trees, but the more important part is the very first thing they brought out was the lamb.
The
Well,
lamb.
and Jesus is always the Lamb of God.
Right.
When I was watching this part and thinking about it artistically, I imagined that maybe this was supposed to be some depiction of hell or a dark world or something like that.
There's Satan again, bouncing around. It's the creepiest stuff, all these dead animals are carrying through.
Right after that, though, this man gets on a stage and sings in gibberish, and he even speaks in gibberish. It's kind of like he's calling for Satan, and Satan does respond.
It's almost creepy just to listen to it, but again, you can picture all the politicians are hanging out just cheering.
Right after that, the man who is singing sits down and watches everyone around him start celebrating. Possibly celebrating the arrival of Satan? There are a few who speculate that the red lights in here are supposed to represent a blood sacrifice, but that's not really clear to me. At least until they take the severed head of a woman and lift it above the dancers.
For some reason.
The silk that falls from her head seems to represent that she was decapitated, as though it's blood.
Now,
All
reminder,
cheering.
this is just for like an opening of a tunnel. I mean, this is, you know, like, could you imagine having this?
The severed head is then put on a body of a woman, and the first train makes its way through the tunnel. Now, if that was it, fine. It's freaking strange, but the next half of this display actually takes place outside. So here we are in part 2.
Notice that, again, the communists, all the workers marching united.
They look almost like trance, like in a
Yeah, they're in
trance.
trance, yeah.
And once they get up there, the workers start climbing up the wall and removing rock to form this tunnel. Now, there were a few videos I saw where they were speculating...
What's going on
that this
here
was
is there
the
was
rock
9
to
workers
Christ,
that died
but
in the
I
building of
didn't
this
really
tunnel.
catch the
I
evidence
think
for that.
they had a
Just
bunch
not
of
sure
people
the
climbing up these
symbolism was
walls,
there to
falling
make it
off and
look like
dying. I
Oh
have a
my gosh,
feeling-
and so they're representing that.
I think they might be representing that. Yeah, I don't think there's
That's-
anything too much beyond that, but I don't know.
Well, that's insane. I mean, that, if anything, that's just disturbing at best. I mean,
Honestly, it's part 2 that gets really weird. Instead of opening a tunnel, they seem to open up a portal, and they perform this ritualistic dance in order to open it up. One thing a few people noted was as the tunnel opened up, the workers started removing their clothes, which could symbolize a corruption of their minds. Like right and wrong doesn't exist.
You may not have
before they
noticed it, but
open
the
this
portal it opens up was full of
which
human
does seem
arms.
to happen. As the
That's
tunnel
weird.
opens, eventually people dress similarly to how
Now
they
they're
did
standing
when
there in
they
their
were the
underwear.
hellish realm from part 1.
What does this have to do with...
Eventually, the music takes over again, and the people seem hypnotized and controlled. But after this is where things get really interesting. It looks like some sort of voluntary human sacrifice happens. These 3 men climb up into the tunnel and hang themselves until they're dead. And then
We
there's
talked
this
about how
animation of
suicide-
the 3 workers being hurled down the tunnel as these giant demonic hands.
we have representation of suicide, and now they fall into the
At this
depths
point,
and
that the 3 men who sacrifice themselves
become
turn into 3
spirits.
spirits and float above the scene with an all-seeing
Yeah, this
eye,
is-
and a group of followers underneath who grab their long horns and start playing. And right after this, Satan returns. And at this point, it kind of makes sense why the first half of this performance was inside. It could have been a metaphor for Satan leaving his world and entering ours, which...
yeah.
What the hell?
Could you imagine just having this light and fluffy thing for like the opening of your new business?
This whole show is just straight up weird.
Like-
This isn't some sideshow. This was the opening ceremony
Yeah.
for a train tunnel.
here he is again.
Such a glorification of darkness. It's just like a mockery of, you know, like that influence on people.
And right after Satan comes, you have these demonic creatures again, and those 3 men who turned into 3 ghosts.
Now we're bringing in
now
ancient
seem to have
Egypt.
reincarnated
Notice
into
this, the
3
scarab
scarabs.
is a...
Maybe they were all never the same thing, but the number
Definitely
3 shows
related
up
to
a lot in this
Egypt.
video. The goat man, who we suspect is Satan, then proceeds to have sex with a fallen angel.
We're not
or a
going to show
woman of
that,
some
are we?
sort.
They
And then
don't
for a
they don't show
while,
any
it's
of the
nothing but
details there. It's just
chaos.
that. Yeah, this is trying to keep this as PG as humanly possible. Cut out a lot of the bad stuff.
Yeah.
But Satan just gave,
Now, this we saw
has a
before
child
with the
now,
man in
just
the
gave
tunnel singing
birth.
for Satan. Now we have a woman singing for Satan, and his
Now they're
new
bringing in the
followers are
upside down
bringing
trees with the mockery of
upside down trees
Jesus.
as offerings again. What seems to be Satan's bride enters the stage with a pregnant belly and another young goat-headed man, and this kind
You
of
almost,
brings
it's
a
like, it's
massive
just such a
chaotic
mockery of
representation
everything.
modern
Now we have
world.
another baby
They even
Satan.
put
I'm assuming
political
that's supposed to be
heads
the
in suits and
Antichrist.
walked them down the aisle that Satan was on.
Not sure.
Yeah.
Now they bring out the politicians. Notice that? We've been talking about the demonic influence on politics.
And
Yeah,
at
it's
the
like
end, we
they're
have a happy little melody. People are
almost
singing
like
and rejoicing
saying
over the new
that
tunnel.
they're in control of that. It's almost like a
Exactly right.
bragging. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, that's
Right, so-
really
So
disturbing.
we watched that video. It's absolutely disturbing. It's absolutely demonic. It's got, I mean, honestly, the stuff we've already talked about, the fallen angels, it is unbelievable. And the politicians, if they, I didn't put that in the video, but they shots of politicians all cheering, clapping. What a wonderful and incredible thing we did. And you got Satan, you've got, I assume, the Antichrist, you've got hell, going from hell, then coming into our natural world through these portals. And we just talked about CERN talking about portals. I mean, this stuff is unbelievable. But I think the point I wanted to land on is one you just brought up. At the end, they have put the big heads on these people. They're the politics. They're the politicians. And they're basically just coming right out and saying, we control
them.
politics.
Yeah. Yeah.
All this demonic stuff, and we end it with, we control the politicians. It's scary.
It is. It's like deception to the utmost degree. It's I always say, like, deception is you are unaware that you're being lied to. That's like the definition of deception. Now we'll get in the next video that we do after this, how can we protect ourselves from that?
Right.
How can we on ourselves can't be aware, because like I said, it's the definition of deception. You're unaware. It's manipulation.
Yep.
You're unaware of it. You just walk right in, just like those workers, the construction workers in that video. It was like they were in a trance, just kind of marching,
Almost like
to
where they're
this
being told to
way.
go. They're just doing
Yeah,
what they do. Yeah.
exactly.
They're
And
on
it's-
trance. They don't know why they're doing it.
Yeah, so that's clearly high level stuff. So like you're talking about the principalities and thing. Now, is there something like in our day-to-day lives that we can see evidence of this form of manipulation, this control, kind of deception that, that we see, that we just see and
Yeah.
what we've
when we
seen.
talked about science, we talked about politics. So let's talk about culture, right? Because we definitely see the influence of the demonic realm in everyday culture. And I'm sorry, you can't go through any town without seeing a tarot card reader, right?
Yeah, or like palm reader.
Palm reader.
Something like that. I have a couple stories from my past that, and this was years ago at one job that I worked at. It was after 9/11 and they saw like a dip in the profit and they were, concerned about that. And I remember they were like the owners of this place that I worked just kind of like open themselves to like whatever, because people would be like, hey, we'll pray for you. And they're like, oh yeah, pray. Well, and it was like anything. And there was one man that worked there, and I'm not going to get into a lot of the details, but he was not a good person. I mean, he was caught in lies. He was actually fired at one point and then brought back. He was a manipulator. He was very crafty at it. He was very good at it. And it was because of him, he got a lot of people fired there. And I ended up losing my job in a very sketch way. But I saw other people before me getting fired and then being lied about, like blatantly. Like it was unbelievable. Like I couldn't, if I didn't live through it, if I didn't see it, I wouldn't have believed it. But when it happens to you and you witness it, now when I hear other people saying lies about, other people, even when I hear them in politics, like, saying lies about this, I always take all of those things with a grain of salt and knowing like, hey, let's watch people's actions, they might say one thing, but they do another. Watch and kind of like just be smart about it, because there are liars out there. There are manipulators. And
So, well, hold on. So this guy, what did he do?
so what he did, well, besides lying and manipulating and
Right.
twisting the truth and saying these weird things about people to get
But
them
one
fired,
could argue anybody could just do that just without being influenced
He
by a demon. You could still do those
ended
things.
up, and I heard this for myself. I didn't witness it happening, but he said, I'm going to come in after hours and burn sage.
There it is. Yep.
And he said he burned sage all around it. And that I think, I mean, I don't have an education here, right? But my understanding is that sage, the thought or the theory on it like wards off evil
Cleansing.
presence. It cleanses or whatever. And so I remember thinking at this point that I'm like, okay, that is not godly. That is dabbling in witchcraft and something that is weird. It's not right. And I will tell you, after I heard him say he did it, things got weird. And they got weird. It was like, I witnessed, like, my manager at the time, she got laid off. She was so good at what she did. She was an amazing manager. I really liked her a lot. And her mom worked there as well as the front desk. And this woman was incredible woman. Like, in fact, she was her stepmother, but she didn't even, like, she just, she was like, hey, that's my mom.
Right.
Sadly, her mom was, not in her life or in her biological mom. So she was her mom for all intents and purposes. And this woman was so nice. And they fired her. Well, after they fired my manager, not only did they just fire her for weird grounds, they started lying about her. It got to a point where she had to actually get an attorney involved because they weren't even allowing her to go forward in her life, getting a new job. And it was blatant lies. And like I said, if I wasn't there to witness it, I wouldn't have believed it. Then her mom got fired and then her best friend that worked at the office got fired. And it was like everyone that was associated with friends of hers, I was on the chopping block next. And the way they did it was like so creepy. They just basically told me like, oh, we're not busy enough. You can stay home. And then after like a week and a half, I was like called there. I'm like, so you haven't been busy for a week and a half. And it was weird. And that's how I got let go. But then I found out that they started doing all these lies about me that were unbelievable. And one of my friends that they told these lies to about me to this guy called me and was like, hey, I can't believe you said this and can't believe you did this. And I remember I just said to him, I said, look, you've worked with me for the last couple years. You know my heart. If you can tell me that you've never witnessed them being deceitful or lying, and you have witnessed me doing that, then like, just food for thought. I said, but I'm telling you, I have not done the things that they say that I did, and you can either believe me or not. And then I said that, like, pay attention to people's actions. A couple months later, he called and apologized because he knew that they were the ones lying and it wasn't me. And I'm like, what value did it have? I already lost my job. I already left. These other people are left. So why tack us after this? It was insane. It was so insane. It was so dark.
And so you're saying
very dark. It was uncomfortable.
What likely was this sort when this person came in and they asked for prayer, they asked for all these different things, and one of the responses was, I'm going to come in and burn sage. Once that occurred, that was an invitation for dark spirits, because the burning of sage is not a godly principle.
No.
It is more of a Wicca. We talked about in the book of Enoch, the cutting of roots. I was talking about that is more of a Wicca type of activity, a divination type of thing. So they went and burned sage in this office and brought these spirits in, and then you see the results of that. Suddenly there's lying, there's cheating, there's people getting fired. And what happened to the place? Did it
Oh,
survive?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I honestly, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. But
Probably nothing good though.
it wasn't good. Like they may have flourished. I will say this: the business may have flourished because you, even though you can't sell your soul to the devil, you can partner with the devil. He is small g, lowercase g, God of this world. And so when you see a lot of people becoming famous and being enriched with worldly things. So they might have like material possessions. They might they might be doing well, but they are prisoners in their own mind. They've lost their freedom. There is a bondage and a slavery that comes over them. It is not a great way to live. Sadly, you see this with a lot of people in Hollywood and things like that where they commit suicide. Yeah. They're on drugs. They're addicted to something. Yep. So they might have everything that the world offers, but they're enslaved to themselves. They're enslaved to this. So it's bondage. So to answer your questions, they may have flourished.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Okay,
but individual there's no flourishing in that. There's no peace in that. There's no joy in that.
Okay. So the circle back then in culture, are we seeing demonic influence in culture? We just talked about burning sage. That is not a godly principle. Tarot cards, palm reading, none of those things are godly principles. Where do they come from and do they work? A lot of people say they don't work. They're just fake. And then other people say they absolutely do work. Can you speak just briefly about like how does a tarot card reading work?
So again, I'm not
being a subject matter expert on this.
Yeah, I'm not a subject matter expert, but my understanding, and I had heard this. I watched a podcast. John Ramirez was being interviewed. Now, if you're unfamiliar with who he is, he was a warlock. His testimony is incredible. He grew up, I think, in the Bronx. Don't quote me on that.
Doesn't matter. But
anyways, he was born into a family that practiced witchcraft. And so at a very young age, he kind of was, wrapped up in this. His testimony, I can't do it justice, but eventually he became aware of the truth. Right. He accepted Jesus as his Lord and Savior in his heart, and he was freed from this. But he has inside information on how this operates in the spiritual realm. So in this podcast, I had heard him talk about tarot cards. And so now tarot cards, what I understand and what he explained in this podcast is there's 3 piles. And the first pile represents the past. Mm-hmm. The second pile represents the present. And the third pile represents the future. Well, in the past, the familiar spirits, which I know you're explaining a little bit more
in our next video.
Yep. But familiar spirits will speak to the psychic involved and those spirits will speak to the psychic about a couple things that are true in this person that they're reading the cards for, right? And so that person will be like, wow, how'd they know that? No one would have known that and whatnot. Then they will do the same thing in the present. So they will speak, some of these things, and they'll be like, wow, how do you know that? Well, then they switch to the future, which they do not know.
Correct.
They don't know, but they say something. They're saying, oh, you're going to find love, or you're going to be in a car accident, or you're going to do something. Well, there's people, I'm not going to believe that. I don't know. And they go away, and then that's kind of in them because these familiar spirits, they've studied you. They know things. So they know about people's past. They know about your present. Well, since they don't know about the future, they can just make up things. But because they were aware of this conversation, this interaction, then because there's this demonic realm, they can kind of create things or make suggestions. Maybe you start believing it. Maybe you start speaking it. I always say that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
So maybe you were told you were going to be in a car accident. Maybe you get in a car accident.
And culture right now likes to call it manifestation. It is so rampant in the culture right now. We want to manifest this. We manifest by thinking about it. Well, what if you think about something that that is going to steal, kill, or destroy you.
I've heard situations, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, where they will manifest like a love, like say they feel like they have a
Pairing with
person,
somebody,
a
right?
soul, like, yeah, I forget what they call it. But anyways, and and these people have free will, and they're going to be like, no, I'm not your soulmate. I'm not going to do that. And they try to like manipulate the situation. So things like that. So they're operating. So something will happen in their future that's tormenting, that it's bad. It's, like car accidents, or they lose money or whatever. So then they want that pain to stop. And so they go back to the psychic, and because they told them about their past, they knew about their present. Now they're like, oh, they must be correct on the future, even though they made that up. And so then the psychic will be like, well, for money, you give me money, then I'll make this pain go away. I'll call back the demonic, things or whatever. Well, they won't call it demonic, or whatever. Right. And so then so then that's how it was. So there's this familiar spirit, but there's also this deception and a willingness to deceive. And obviously it is for money, power, influence. Yep. So it's a really bizarre thing, but
yeah.
I really don't know a ton about it. But I will tell you this. So I do some sales on Facebook Marketplace. So recently I'll go on there and see what is being sold or whatever. And I'm also part of some groups. I was shocked. I logged onto Facebook, and a post for Facebook Marketplace came up that something was on sale, and it was dirt. It was a literal bag of dirt. It said Crossroads Dirt, and it was for spells. And I'm like, it's so mainstream that like a local Facebook marketplace is selling dirt, which blows my mind that people can just like go out in the yard, scoop up some dirt in a Ziploc bag and sell it. And people are believing that, oh, I buy this and do spells. And I know this before we were ever here. I know these spells and things like that were already here. We've talked about that in other podcasts, right? But I've never seen them so mainstream, where you can go into the local fun coffee shop or gift stores or whatever, and they're selling these sage bunches. They're selling
everywhere.
Crystals. They're selling little tarot cards, and they're marketed. They're marketed to like young kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm seeing this stuff
early.
sold. At all. I don't want to like throw businesses under the bus, but I'm seeing them sold like in mainstream marketplaces.
Yeah.
Like it's really crazy.
Yeah. It's devastating.
It's not something to mess with.
It isn't. In that, I think, again, so we've been talking about, is there evidence? How can you not say there's evidence when tarot card, if you believe in a tarot card, you believe in the spiritual realm. And I'm telling you, you're believing in the demons. And
there is no good or bad spiritual, like dark realm, like, because I there's this white magic and this dark magic, and you have all this stuff. No, everything outside God, it's all bad. It's all intends to steal,
being good,
kill,
but it's
and
not.
Destroy.
Yeah.
Right. It's all bad. There is no white magic that's good. It's all bad.
Great. All right, we're going to land this one then, because this is really a segue podcast to our next one. So I just want to say, we laid out, what demons likely are. We've laid out their command and control structure. As best we can say, like, we're not 100% by any stretch on that, but we know what they're trying to do: is steal, to kill, and destroy. And we talked about some of the ways they do that, and we've given. Like in the science realm, they're there. In the political realm, you watch that video, how can you say it's not there? In everyday life, you can just drive down the street, find that palm reader, that tarot card, sage burning. That's just a small subset of all the different things that people are walking in. There's books on witchcraft and warlocking, and we saw a TikTok video, I guess it was, some lady getting shelves out of the river so she could cast a spell on somebody. The girl was like 21 or something. Like, it's everywhere.
Right.
And I think you have to have your eyes closed to not believe that that's what's going on. So I just want to land it there. This next video is so important, our next podcast. This is just almost like part one of it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about next on the individual. And I just think it's so important. So I'm just asking you, if you watch this one, please watch the next one too. It's so critical to get an understanding of not just the world systems, but also on the individual. How are these demonic forces appearing?
Right.
So
yes,
important.
They're not under every rock.
Right.
And there is freedom from it.
Yep.
And you don't have to be scared by it, even though it can be a really destructive thing if you're willing to entertain it and bring it into your life. But
right. But there is freedom from it. And that's why this next podcast is so important, because we're going to ask that question and we're going to answer it. What are you supposed to do?
Exactly.
This stuff is everywhere.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do about it? And we're going to answer that question for everybody.
Yes.
So I'm just going to wrap us up, babe.
Yes.
Thank you again, as always. We just ask you like this video and subscribe, and most important, just share. If you know anybody that needs to hear these podcasts, just share with them. And with that, have a great day.
Yeah.